Hi, Dolly. Thanks so much for joining us on Minds Worth Meeting. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you, Whitney. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Dolly.
Hey, Justin. It's great to be with you.
Really appreciate you making time to be on our podcast. We've really been looking forward to this because we know conversations with you are always uplifting and fun.
Oh my gosh, we're setting the bar too high, but we'll do our best.
It's not even just the conversations. We're loving your monthly newsletter, Dear Good People. We are always excited to see what's going on with Cocoa Bean, the Wonder Puppy, and your girls. And every email is an informational and entertaining nugget in my inbox. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so glad. They're equally educational and fun to write. Actually, I'm very much like just in it with the reader, so I'm so glad that comes through.
So what do you want the readers to take away from the newsletter?
Yeah. The newsletter started out. Uh, my book publisher had been saying for a while it would be great to start a newsletter. It's a great way to connect with readers after your book is out, and they kind of want to keep the conversation going. And that all made perfect sense. She was, making very rational sense, but I wasn't like feeling it in my heart to do it. It's a lot of work to do this kind of thing. After George Floyd was murdered, I suddenly felt like I wanted to be in dialogue and I wanted to be a resource to people, especially to people who maybe were new to thinking about issues around equity and bias and inclusion, and to kind of meet people where they are in a way that is, as you said, informative, but also joyful and zeitgeisty and pop culture-y and sometimes silly, but always kind of landing with a point and a takeaway. So that's if people coming away having learned a little and smiled a little, I'm happy. And it's funny. I'm on sabbatical at the moment from my role at NYU. And so I've taken a short pause from the newsletter, and I mean, it'll be back, I'm sure, but I missed it. Like I miss kind of having that in my bloodstream of like just thinking about that dialogue with
Right.
with the audience.
And I think one of the things that you accomplish really well is it's one thing, especially for, a teacher and a speaker like yourself, to get people to pay attention. It's a really hard thing to get people to connect. And I think you do a really good job of that because you talk about your kids, you talk about your dog, you talk about the family and going to
Yeah.
movies. And I think taking that next step to getting people to feel something, to really connect with you as a person is just, it's great.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I mean, the whole like life is hard. Like no matter who you are, life is hard. Everybody's got a lot going on, and I think we have to sort of break through that and just, speak to each other in a relatable level.
So one of the things you did mention about wanting to get more into the conversations of DEI and equity. So what really started you down this path? What really drives your work?
Yeah, there's very much a flavor of sometimes research is me search to my work, of feeling myself confused that I don't know the right thing to say, or trying to keep up with what the terminology is, or um, offending someone but not understanding what I did wrong, or being scared to say
Mhm.
something. Like these are moments that I feel like I encounter a lot. And I really wanted to understand that better as a psychologist. And I also wanted to develop some tools on how to do better. So that's where the work comes from. It's not a particularly lofty intellectual place. It comes from a place of personal growth and having the tools as a social scientist to build an evidence-based foundation on how to do better.
I
And
thought your TED Talk did a really good job of showing that vulnerability in those situations where you don't know what to say, you don't want to say the wrong thing, nobody wants to make a mistake, right?
Right.
And the way you explained going from being a good person to a goodish person, that really hit home and kind of took the weight off of
Right.
making mistakes in this space. Can you tell us what is being a goodish person?
Yeah. Well, this builds off of the amazing research of Carol Dweck, Amy Edmondson, and others. The essence of it is that when we're in a mindset known as a fixed mindset, where we either, are a good person or we're not a good person. We are a racist or we're not a racist. It's sort of this binary space where there's no room to expand or grow or
Hmm.
develop. You are what you are. Maybe you're great, maybe you're terrible, but whatever it is, it's not changing. That that mindset, fixed mindset, what the research says is that we will actually not persist when things get tough. We'll not learn from mistakes when we make them. We actually won't even acknowledge the mistakes. We'll like deflect it to others. And we all sometimes are in a fixed mindset. I mean, that's just a very human state of mind. But there's a contrasting mindset that we all are also sometimes in called a growth mindset. And in a growth mindset, we make a mistake. Maybe we're mortified. Maybe we're upset. But we kind of, soak up the learning that there is in that mistake. And um, those, uh, those moments of growth in a growth mindset are what I refer to as being goodish. Instead of being a good person, this brittle, tightropey kind of mindset, we're in this like stretchy mindset where we're better today than we were last week and last month and last year and last decade. So it's actually a source of pride when you're feeling goodish to be able to talk about the things you got wrong, the jokes you used to think were funny that now you understand differently, or the shows you used to watch and now that make you cringe. Like that's not a source of shame. That's an evidence of growth. It's evidence of being goodish, taking ownership, learning, stretching yourself as you go.
I love that. So in your book from last year, More Just Future, Psychological Tools for Reckoning with Our Past and Driving Social Change, your South by Southwest presentation, pretty heavy theme. Can we love a country with a complicated past? That's a, like I said, it's a heavy topic. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it is a heavy topic, but hopefully in that talk we were able to break it down and actually, find the sort of spaces of relatability and even joy. I'll actually give you a very concrete example that both illustrates the topic and illustrates the joy in a talk like that. Um, we all have a tendency towards nostalgia when we think
Mhm.
about the past. We can think of nostalgia as like a sentimental form of history. And when I give the talk where we talk about how do we reckon with the way nostalgia kind of takes over our brains, I actually put images up on the screen, and I have to sort of guesstimate how old my audience is going to be or what the range is going to be. So I put up the right images that will evoke toys they played with in childhood.
Right.
So, with certain audiences, I have like Viewmasters with the little thing we used to click, those little red things. With other audiences, it's Minecraft. With other audiences, it's Rainbow Loom, bracelets. The other audience, it's Pillow Pet. I gave a talk to undergrads recently, and I put up an image, and I don't know if either of you even knows what a pillow pet is, but I put up this image of this just picture. It's a stuffed animal, but like as a pillow. It's sort of built to be a pillow, but it's a stuffed animal. It's like looks like a ladybug or something.
Mhm.
I put up this image in front of 500 undergrads, and I completely lost control of the audience because everybody was like, they were turning to their neighbors. And like, there was this, it's exactly what the research says about nostalgia. It gives us a sense of belonging. It gives us a sense of safety. It gives us a sense of connection. There's all these psychological benefits to that sentimental version of thinking about the past. That's kind of cool. The only thing is, when we live in a society that has a past that's had both beauty and brutality, that's had both honor and horror, if we only understand the sentimental version of that, the beauty and the honor, and not the brutality and the horror, we will not be able to understand the society we live in now.
Right.
We will look at how every meaningful life outcome in the United States has a racial disparity associated with it. And we won't understand that
Cocoa bean.
The culprit. Where is he? Coco, show your face. Is he showing up?
Oh,
Whoa,
yes.
Hey, debut on Minds Worth Meeting.
there you go. Coco. Where's the dog? All right. I was on a roll too.
No, you're doing great. This is exactly what I love when I say that, we're making this human connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's real life.
Oh, it's real life, folks.
Yeah.
So when we try to understand the disparities of today, when we say, pay gaps, health gaps, housing gaps, education gaps, when we try to understand those, if we can't trace it back to where it came from and where the seeds have been planted and growing and growing, growing, we'll reach other conclusions. We'll reach conclusions that are based in stereotypes and bias. And honestly, it's understandable that that's the place we land in, because you don't know where things came from. Why wouldn't you think that? So it becomes all the more important that, as good as the pillow pet feels, the pillow pet version of history, it's not that we have to give up the pillow pet. It's that we have to expand our understanding to not just be about the pillow pet version.
Right.
I always wonder if people really underestimate how difficult this work is to do and how persistent we have to be in revisiting this message day after day. Because just telling a company one time, this is
Yeah.
what you need to do to make your company better, to ensure your employees, have the best well-being and feel like their workspace is also a community where they can be themselves. It's not
Right.
something that happens overnight. We'll be talking about this for the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's for two reasons. One, it's because it's a big, complicated topic.
Mhm.
But two, it's because the world is always changing. So just because I understand something today doesn't mean I'm going to understand it equally well. I mean, the analogy I use in my TED Talk is our phones that, and actually I did change phones recently, and sure enough, I needed to like update my knowledge and update my skills and ask other people for help and Google a few things and feel a little foolish because I don't know how to do some basic thing. How do you go on silence, silent mode? Like things that you feel like you should know. Like that's just like we'll never quite master our phone. As soon as we do, there's going to be the new model. The same thing is going to happen with these issues of DEI.
Do you think it's a generational difference in that growth mindset? Is it easier for
Yeah.
Gen Z to say, "Oh, this is something new. Let me put this in my toolkit," versus other generations?
There may be some element of that. And on the other hand, I think there's also the younger generations are very sensitive to being canceled or what they perceive as being canceled and the digital footprint of things. So there's a little bit going in both directions, I think.
When I just moved my mother, I found my stash of Viewmaster cartridges, and it was E.T. and Indiana Jones. And I'm looking at these, and I'm like, these have got to be worth money. I got to figure out what to do with this stuff because it's been in my mother's basement for 40 years.
The classic.
Yeah, and it's funny, Justin, you say that because if I'm speaking to an audience that's a Viewmaster audience and I mention it, and then who knows what this is? I show a picture of it, hands go up. I ask someone in the audience, what is it? Tell me. I mean, the nonverbals on their face, the excitement as they tell me about ET and the Disney World one they had, or everybody, the national parks, they get really into telling me about it. And then when the talk is over, inevitably I have a couple of people come up to the front to find me because they didn't get to tell me what was in their Viewmaster. It really, this is the power of nostalgia. And by the way, nostalgia is really big business, right? Like if you look at almost every major industry, there is a nostalgia like subsector in that industry that's like $1 billion industry. And so it's psychologically, economically incredibly powerful. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we don't let that eclipse the work we need to do to grapple with the fact that we do have a complicated history. And it isn't just at the country level. It can be at the company level. It can be at the town or community level. It can be at the family level. It can be at the team level. You know, the stuff that we're sort of Instagramming away as opposed to dealing with that kind of complicated history. So what I've written about in A More Just Future has focused at the United States country level, offering 7 concrete psychological tools, but those tools can be transferred to other countries and other entities.
I'd like to take us to companies and thinking about leaders.
Yeah.
You've been talking lately about what it means to be a great boss. What does a great boss look like? What do they do?
I've been teaching for a while a course it's an elective to MBA students. It's essentially how to be a great boss. And I love teaching this course. Part of what we're doing is unlearning some narratives about what a boss is. I hope my students leave the course first and foremost remembering, internalizing that a boss is human. And it sounds like such a simple takeaway, but that is not the narrative we have imbibed our entire lives, whether it's from the workplace or from the media. And it's a really costly narrative to lose our humanity as bosses, because it makes it so difficult to raise the psychological safety in the workplace. It makes it so difficult to stimulate positivity, to give tough feedback, to raise performance standards, to deal with crisis. These are all moments where we need our humanity to rise to the forefront. And by that, by humanity, I mean we need to be able to understand people as individuals. We need to be able to show up as who we are and recognize the impact, have the self-awareness to realize the way we sometimes show up does not work for our entire team. And we need to be able to sort of moderate the impact we're having on others, particularly when things are stressful. So we work throughout the course on building tools that will, in the end, at the end of the course, the students reach their own conclusion about the value of their own humanity. And it's such a powerful course. Students, from a performance rating standpoint, at the end of the course, it gets very good ratings. But what really is meaningful to me is not what they say, as they graduate. It's what they say a few years later once they're in the workplace managing people. And that's when I get the emails that really speak to the value of being able to draw on tools that allow them to connect with people as human beings, not in a touchy-feely, soft way, in a high performance standards. What does it mean to not show up as a robot and not treat people like robots? Which, used to be a metaphor, but like now it's kind of weirdly, morphing into reality.
When you hear from former students years later, are there any particular tools or strategies that keep coming up as this is something that really had an impact on me?
There are a number, and I do think it varies by the student because they sort of show up with their own needs. But I would say the coaching shows up a lot, and I actually, Lenore Champagne Byrne is a former student of mine who's now a coach. She helped me learn how to teach this content as well, and implement it in my own life. And it was really around the coaching toolkit of questions, asking questions. So, employee comes to you, is stuck, can't move forward on XYZ problem. And the instinct is to solve the problem for them or to give them advice, to be helpful is our instinct. And sort of the more pro-social a boss you are, the more you want to be helpful, the more you're like, you're a problem. But we talk a lot about a coaching mindset would not put me in the role of solving the problem, but put me in the role of helping you solve the problem or build the capacity or help me removing obstacles that will allow you to solve the problem, maybe get to the right person. And so that is, again, it's like not the narrative of the boss you see on TV where the boss is like, rah. They're not like sitting patiently, asking questions, allowing silence, bearing witness to your pain. Like those things are not the sort of typical toolkit, but they turn out to be incredibly powerful because it releases the boss from being the bottleneck and allows everyone around you to grow and be great.
And I do have to say, this is a big career change for me, working where I am now here at Stern, doing the marketing writing, and it's because I have good bosses. And I promise I'm not just saying that because she's on this interview. But from Whitney above, the other supervisors I work with really helped me because it is intimidating, at mid-career to kind of make a huge change like I did. And, if it wasn't for those bosses who led me along, it would have been a lot harder. And I
Wow.
appreciate that.
Well,
Thank you,
I
Justin.
appreciate hearing that, and I bet Whitney does too. So can you, what are some of the behaviors or tools you've noticed them doing that you find helpful?
Most patience,
Patience.
and the understanding that I am learning a new trade while I'm
Yep.
doing this. Where it all comes back to, I was in radio for about 20 years before this, so it all comes back to communicating. In the end,
Yep.
it's just learning how we communicate in this business, at a speakers bureau, at an agency, and again, it all comes back to the same thing. But having my bosses be able to lead me along that path of this is how we message here, has been not only helpful, but I mean, transformative.
Oh, wow. I love that. And, and that's, the talk I'm sort of been thinking a lot about for the coming years around a toolkit for psychological safety, where the idea of psychological safety is the belief that you can be candid, that you can take the interpersonal risks needed to learn. And what I hear you saying is, because that means when you say patience, that you're able to ask questions, you're
Yep.
able to make mistakes, you're able to suggest things as an outsider that might not be
Mhm.
how things are always done, that you're able to sort of challenge an assumption. Like these are all the kinds of things that our natural instinct is to be afraid of doing those things, and that's not irrational. Like there are many environments where there's good reason to not do those things.
Yep.
But if you can create an environment where Justin can come in and grow and learn, and not only do this job well, but bring all this outside knowledge from another industry, this is a gold mine. That's amazing, and a job well done by your bosses.
Yes, I agree.
And I don't know if it's because of the type of company we have that we work in, that we do very much seek outside expertise
Yeah,
different from what we currently have.
makes
So
sense.
when we were looking to add writers to the team, we were looking for people who could also do the radio stuff, and we just happened to find Justin as well. We were looking for
Oh,
people who had tech backgrounds, and we found Meg. So I always find it fascinating when leaders tell employees, I don't need your outside opinion. I just need you to do what I'm telling you to do. Don't think about it. Just do what I'm asking you to do. That just seems like
right.
a non-productive way to make the company better.
That's right. And the times when it makes sense to have that mindset are times when you're perhaps under tremendous time pressure or
Mhm,
crisis,
mhm.
or when the risks are so high that a mistake is lost time or lost performance due to a mistake is just too costly. But the truth is, in most of our jobs, most of the time, that's not the situation we're in, and we can build small experiments and small learning opportunities to create that learning curve and move up it, so that, as you said, Whitney, I mean, why bring in that person without outside expertise and then not use it? You're paying
Right.
for it.
So you also speak about conflict and collaboration at work within teams, and nobody comes to work wanting to argue with coworkers. I hope. But I know that many times we try to avoid conflict as much as possible. So you might have that one
Yeah.
person in the office, and rather you do what you got to do to get the work done with them, but you
Right.
keep it moving after that. How do you recommend we move from conflict to collaboration, because that's really no way to work. You want to, be as amicable with coworkers as possible, but how do we move from having this tension to being able to joyfully work with colleagues?
Yeah. I think part of what's helpful is distinguishing between the type of conflict you're experiencing. One distinction that researchers make is task conflict versus relational conflict. So, a task conflict is, you and I have a different point of view on what topics we should cover in this interview. Or you and Justin in developing the interview guide, one of you thinks you should focus on X and the other one thinks you should focus on Y. That's task conflict. And depending on how strongly you believe in it, it could be a very intense conflict. That isn't necessarily a personal conflict if it stays within the issues, or if you're both equally predisposed to not necessarily agree with the other person, but you don't sort of diminish the value of their view because of who's saying it. So it becomes a personal conflict if when Joe says we should do X, you say no, but when Jane says we should do X, you say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's it's representing itself more as a relational conflict. So relational conflicts are really damaging to performance. They almost never sort of help us raise our game. Task conflicts can actually really improve performance because you're both challenging each other and sort of raising each other's game. Mm-hmm. And so the key is to keep task conflict from becoming personal or relational. And if it's a relational conflict, to see if you can sort of neutralize or deal with the relational issues and move it into task conflict. So that's one of the keys is noticing the difference. And some people are much more sensitive to, and maybe it has something to do with kind of the culture or community or family they grew up in and they were imprinted on with, but that any disagreement feels relational.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really think we should do Y. And that feels like, oh my gosh, I don't value you, or I don't think you're contributing. And so sometimes we have to work pretty hard to kind of, convince someone that what our disagreement is merely a task disagreement, not a relational disagreement. So that's one place I'd start. And I could keep going, but I'll pause there for your reaction.
And I see a lot of positivity and curiosity, when you have those task conflicts, and, I'll say that's not how I would do it, but why? Why do you think this is another way we should do it? And again, the best workplaces I've worked at has been curious people. This is why I think we should do it this way. And, I think that propels you forward.
Yeah. And I mean, we're sort of pulling the same thread through every topic in this conversation. It's all about sort of learning and growth. And the curiosity is another great example of that. There used to be a wonderful radio talk show host. She was actually the inspiration for Frasier, the TV show, I understand, named Dr. Joy Brown. Sadly, mm-hmm. She's passed away, but she had a tagline that was, don't be furious, be curious. And I really have leaned on that often, because in those moments when you feel most dismissed or argued with, to sort of go into that place that you just described of, okay, let me see if I could just ask you a question to understand, or if I could stop talking long enough to actually listen to you. Another tool, and this one, you have to sort of, I think, have a bit of a relationship with someone to use, but my husband and I use this tool a lot, which is on a 1 to 10 scale, how important is this issue to you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's what they want, there's why they want it, but there's also how much they want, whatever it is. And, if 10 is the most important, 1's the least important, the way we do it in our personal relationship, and you could do this in a work relationship too. I don't have this with any of my work colleagues, but it could easily work, is if one of us, whoever has the higher number, wins, unless we're both over a 7. in which case we need to really talk it through. But if one person's a 7 and one person's a 3 over what font you should use in the brochure, I mean, like, just use whoever cares the most. Times New Roman it is, like that kind of thing. And so we found that to be actually pretty helpful in bypassing a lot of conflicts. And then what people always say when I propose this tool is like, what if someone always uses a 10 for everything? Well, then you'll quickly realize that their tendency to sort of dig in makes this tool less useful unless they're willing to acknowledge the sort of pattern. And you can notice it. You can note it that, I notice a number of things that come up are deeply important to you. Could we rank them on a scale of 10 to 10.9? Like, can we sort of find the variation within whatever range you're using? But people use their 10 sparingly. I find that people are worried they're going to put a 10 on everything, but people are smart. They know if you use a 10 on everything, you lose your credibility.
I like that.
Right. So bringing us back to DEI and the roles that we've seen in organizations over the last few years, DEI has been part of the business conversation. There was an uptick in appointments for chief diversity officer, and then we saw a downtick in those roles. They seemingly started to disappear. From your perspective, what's happening in this space?
Yeah. And, this kind of takes us back to when we talked about the newsletter and my, that moment when I decided to start the newsletter. It was because I and many others were worried that this sudden spike in interest and commitment was going to result in a sudden fall. And so my first issue of the newsletter was about what I called the 10% more rule. And the 10% more rule, the idea was that let's take racial equity as an example. If there's, this sudden kind of uptick in attention, and you're committed to sustaining your uptick in attention, you need to think about what to do in a sustainable way. And so 10% is like a meaningful increase, but it's not 100% that cannot be sustained. It's more like, running a little faster versus sprinting. Well, or walking a little faster versus sprinting. And so the way the 10% more rule worked is if you were new to an issue, if you truly are coming from a place of, I didn't know this was a problem at all, at that early stage of development, I call 10% more mortified, meaning you're probably like, whoa, how did I not know this was going on in the world around me or going on inside of me in my own heart and mind? I'm really mortified by it. And in that 10% more mortified state, what that means is learning, listening, reading, kind of navigating this new space rather than having lots of opinions and posting lots of things and making a lot of decisions that may or may not be grounded in what's the best practice. On the other hand, if you're not completely new to the issue, maybe you volunteered, maybe you donated, maybe you hashtagged something, you're not, however, taking big risks in that space. There, I would describe it as being 10% more terrified. Like, what would it mean to now not just be sort of on the sidelines, but get in the game a little bit? Maybe you're asking a challenging question at a meeting. Maybe you're declining a client because you just can't align with their values. And those are more courageous. There's more at stake. So that's where the terrified piece comes from. If you're not completely new to this, but you haven't really leaned into it. And then if you're in a group that is deeply, you are playing the game. You're playing the whole game. You're never getting a break. 10% more, and I'm going to put it in air quotes, 10% more satisfied, meaning you're not satisfied with the outcome, but you are satisfied that other people can step in, that you can step out of the game briefly and others can pick up some of the work that needs to be done, and then you'll come back in as needed. So 10%, air quotes, satisfied. And the idea with the 10% more rule is that where, depending on where we are in our own learning and growth and curiosity, we're going to need to show up in a different kind of way so that several years later, we're still in this, and maybe we've moved, along. To bring this back to what Whitney, you described in, the sort of drop off. I mean, I don't know any of those individual cases, so I don't know the backstories of them. But I would say as a general trend, we've seen a drop off in attention, that the 100% was not sustainable, and we've now deprioritized things. And I think it's really disappointing. I also suspect there was sort of this results orientation that was like either manifested as, oh, we've checked it off, the result has been accomplished, or, oh my gosh, there's still racial inequity in the world. I guess, we just need to move on. This didn't work out. Neither of those seem like the right form of a results orientation to this kind of longstanding systemic problem. And again, this is where nostalgia gets in the way of understanding how we got here.
It's fascinating how it all comes back to, it's all connected in the end.
It really is. It really is. Full circle.
Last question on this subject. Thinking about the earlier in 2023, when affirmative action in higher ed was repealed.
Yeah.
How can colleges and then also organizations that are hiring those students after college retain their diverse student body, their diverse workforce? What does that look like going forward?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, as I understand the Supreme Court ruling, it affects at the moment colleges. So that's a very specific ruling for a very specific space. There has been some fear or speculation that like corporate efforts, DEI efforts might eventually, also be brought into that umbrella, but they haven't been yet, to be clear. I'm not a legal scholar, so no one should be taking any legal advice from me. But this is my basic understanding of sort of what the ruling did and did not cover. And I think that's important because the initial reaction was sort of like, it felt amorphous, like it affected everything. It's very specific to very specific context. But I think more broadly, affirmative action was always an imperfect solution. I don't think anyone was arguing that this was like great. Like no one wanted to be doing it this way. Mm-hmm. I think the people who so-called benefited, in air quotes, benefited from affirmative action, it hurt them just as much because they always had to sort of deal with this like narrative about themselves that wasn't necessarily true, this false narrative that wasn't true. And so it was never a perfect solution. However, at least it dealt with something from the past in the present. That was the key, is there was nothing else doing it. So if we're not going to have affirmative action, we still need to understand that the present we live in today was shaped by the past, that we, that we've got all these seeds that were planted that have become trees now, and they're big old trees they're casting shade on our goals of equity. So it's going to put even more pressure on our ability to build systems that hire fairly, that are really thinking about both potential and performance. Because if everyone hasn't had similar opportunities in the past to perform, and you're only hiring based on past performance, you're going to lose out on a lot of talent. Justin's not going to get this job because he hasn't worked in a speakers bureau in the past. So we're going to ignore Justin. Mm-hmm. That would be a loss for everybody. Justin just needs an opportunity to kind of get up to speed on what we're doing here. So we've got to realize that if the past has dealt in the past, I do not mean necessarily hundreds of years ago. I mean like the very recent past has been riddled with biases, that the talent pool we're going to we're going to have today is coming in with their track records also riddled with biases.
And I think a great way to understand that, a good primer, is A More Just Future,
Mm-hmm.
psychological tools for reckoning with our past and driving social change.
Look at you. Nice. Thank you. Yes.
And it's absolutely, I mean, for listeners and viewers, absolutely please check out Dolly's TED Talk, South by Southwest. It's all on our website at sternstrategy.com.
Thank you.
So, Dolly, we like to end these interviews with a very quick lightning round. So, first answer that comes to mind,
Okay.
I think they'll be easy questions, but
Okay.
here we go.
Okay.
Who is the most influential mentor in your life?
Max Bazerman, who's was my PhD advisor at the Harvard Business School PhD program. And he, I graduated from that program almost 20 years ago, and he still remains such an influential advisor, mentor, and now friend.
It's wonderful. Thinking about young people, you teach at NYU, you're interacting with young people all the time. What general advice do you give them as they're trying to navigate this world?
Oh, gosh. Well, first, it's not advice, but it's empathy. I think it's a very tough time to be a young person. And I was sort of looking forward to that getting older where I could just be like, in my day, it was so much harder. I really was like waiting. So I felt like I'd been on the receiving end of that, when I was younger. I honestly don't feel like I can, in good faith, make that claim from speaking with young people. I think they're the ones walking uphill both ways in the snow, metaphorically. So, what advice would I give? I give advice to young people all the time as a professor. I guess if I'm looking for the theme and what I share with them, it's to play the long game. That nothing, and that it's all a game, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a game. I mean, the money, the jobs, I don't mean to dismiss the reality that we all have bills to pay, that there's student loans to pay, that especially first generation students, it's often generationally formative for their entire family, whether or not they get that job. That's real. But on the other hand, there's a lot that in the long game isn't going to matter. Mm-hmm. Whether you were the first in your graduating class to get a job offer or the last in your graduating class to get a job offer, nobody's ever going to remember. I have 2 teenage daughters, and I'm looking around because I had it out, but I think I put it away to make my space look neater. I recently dug out of my mom's and dad's house a box of my I'd saved some college papers, and my transcript was right on the top of the box. And I pulled it out, and I have to say the nostalgia I had about my transcript was considerably rosier. I was like, where did that C+ come from? I don't remember any C's in college. Apparently I had some C's. I showed my girls this transcript, and they were just shocked. And it wasn't just the C. It was like a pretty B heavy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with B's, but in my head, I was a stronger student. And I showed my girls this transcript this week because I thought it might make them feel better because they're all stressed about their grades. And they were both like, how are you a professor? How are you even legit? And it's like, well, I guess none of it mattered in the long run. I know at the time I was stressed about this, but
Right.
Play the long game.
That's perfect. Okay, last lightning round question. What's your favorite app on your phone?
Oh God, I love Goodreads. Goodreads is like social media light. It's book related.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a commercial for Goodreads because I actually think it's a terrible app. It's not user friendly, but I love what it does, and I don't really have an alternative for it. So it allows you to keep track of what you want to read,
Mhm.
what you have read. You can create little shelves, like fiction or, books, that I heard about on Jane the Virgin, or, like you can have little shelves. You can see, you can connect. Like if the three of us were connected, I could see what Justin's reading. I could see what Whitney wants to read. I could reach out and be like, oh, do you think that book is a good, use for vacation, and get your opinion on it. It's just, I love that.
What are you reading, Dolly, during this sabbatical time? What's on your Goodreads list?
Well, I mean, that the problem with the Goodreads list is it's like it only gets longer.
Right.
It's shorter because it's so easy to add things. I mean, what I'm actually reading now is Leslie Jones' memoir. Leslie Jones, the comedian, Saturday Night Live star, TV movie star. I'm reading her memoir, and I don't want to say the title here because it has a curse word in it. I don't know if you want a curse word in your podcast, but it's a pretty funny title. And she's a really great storyteller. And so I'm really appreciating, and I'm cheating. And it's not cheating, and edit that out. I'm not cheating. Not consider audiobooks to be cheating. They are not cheating.
Not at
Nope.
all.
But I have
Nope.
both the physical book and the audiobook. And what's really interesting is usually, and I say this as somebody who has recorded her own audiobook, usually they're almost word for word similar. Like they're pretty careful about that. Her audiobook is like 3 times longer than the regular book because she ad libs so much. She just goes on these hilarious, that your really funny friend who makes you laugh. And then when you think they're about to move to the next story, they just double down and then you're going to end up crying because you're laughing so hard. That's her audiobook.
I'm a true believer in audiobooks, and there is nothing better than hearing a person narrate their own memoir or narrate their own work, because they really are telling you the story. Yeah, I love it. Anthony Bourdain's book was one of the first ones that I listened to, and it's just great.
I love that. That is literally my favorite thing in the whole world to do, is to like go for a long walk or drive listening to a memoir narrated by the author. We are in the same place.
Yep. So where can people find you if we want to get you on social media? Oh,
thank you. I'm on everything. DollyChugh.com is my website. It's DOLLYCHUGH. And then I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok, but I don't post things. Yeah, I'm on all the things.
Great.
We'll make sure to link those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dolly. This was a lovely conversation. Thank you for joining us on Minds Worth Meeting. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're both delightful. Thank you.